Hello, Steve Arts 89. Well, it's Friday the 13th, August 2021, but I mean, coronavirus, COVID, who knows when or what. I mean, time has no meaning in the corona zone. I have been doing my traditional Friday the 13th, I'm going to call it birthday marathon, because I kind of feel like every Friday the 13th is Jason's birthday, not just June. But so every Friday the 13th, I watch all the Friday the 13th films, 1 through to 10, and Jason vs. Freddy, and usually the sequel, the remake. And I do watch part 5 as well, although usually, because it takes 2 nights to do this, I normally start after midnight on Thursday, because technically it's Friday the 13th, and then Friday the 13th night, I start, before 12 and go through the rest of the night to finish the other films. I usually fall asleep watching the remake. So often I don't watch the remake all the way through and part 5 all the way through, but I watch all the other films every Friday the 13th, every year. I've been doing this for probably a decade. I can't remember when I started doing it. I used to just watch them whenever I wanted to. But okay, I sort of thought it'd be fun because I was just going through, I started taking some notes on the movies, and I thought, I'm going to do like a little ranking of the actual episodes just for the fun of it. And yes, I actually have paper notes. I know. Old school. Okay, so I'm not going to do a 1 to 10 sort of thing, but I'm just going to give each one a number, basically. So, the first film. Now, I love the first film. The first film in a series, especially a horror series, is always kind of interesting because, I'll get into that. Like this film, okay, Jason is barely even in the film. He's not the killer. His mother is the killer. And spoilers, 40 years later. But, I mean, I love the setting. I love the setup. I like spending time with the counselors. It all seems very innocent. And it's kind of weird. So the difference between the first time you see the film and then reviewing regularly like I do, there are parts that you enjoy more that sort of are still good over time, whereas other parts that aren't. Like a lot of the kills, the shocks, the jumps, the scares, the gore, that sort of fades away a bit. And it's more the characters and sort of the tension, those scenes that still work for me. But I mean, for me, the film's always been a bit too bright. Didn't have enough atmosphere. The cinematography was a bit simplistic. We spend about an hour and 5 minutes with the overall cast of characters before we're down to just the final girl. And that last half an hour of the film is a little bit like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. It's good, but it's very uneven. But I always find that final battle on the beach scary because the actors did it for real and they didn't have any stunt people. And Betsy Palmer was old school and she smacked the out of Adrian King. So every time she lifts up that oar, I'm like, she so could have just missed and killed her. I'm sure of it. Like it feels like a real fight because it is a real fight. So there's elements that you love, and I hear people crying for a 4K. I'm like, I don't want to see Tusso's knuckle hair in 4D, in 4K. But people are screaming for it. So, what do I give this film? I've got to give it a 5 because it doesn't feel like a Friday the 13th film because Friday the 13th as a brand wasn't established yet because it was where it started. But the fact it was where it started and it got the ball rolling and it got a lot of attention and press, and I can't remember if it made the most money out of all the series or not. I think it did. Now part two in some ways has always been my favourite because it I feel like it still had some of the elements of the original where it had fairly high production value. It got a lot of marketing and attention and goodwill because the first film had done so well. Because the first film was made, and that's the sad thing when you look at the making of it, the first film was made very cynically where Sean S. Cunningham just needed a hit. He'd done a bunch of family films that hadn't worked out and he's looking around like, just wait, Halloween. Okay, let's do a horror movie. So Victor Miller went and watched Halloween and said, okay, we need this to work. And it was very cold the way that film was created. It didn't have a organic sort of genesis of creation and passion. It was just like, okay, what parts do we need to make a good horror movie? Here we go, boom. And they did it. They did it well, though. Once they got rolling, obviously they put a lot of time and care into the actual creation of the film. but they didn't really. It's always disappointing when I watch the old interviews and they talk about it like it was like business. Now the second film was a little bit more. Well, we need to capitalize on this money that we got from the first film. So there was a greed there, but I think there were also a lot of people who loved the first film who wanted to, make a good film. So the second one, you spend a little bit more time with the counsellors. There's more counsellors. Takes a bit longer to get to the final girl situation, and it's not quite the final girl. You have Ginny and Paul. And Ginny versus Jason was much more of a roller coaster, which had a lot more scarier scenes and more tension than like the Pamela Voorhees and Alice. It's like stop, start. She's knocked out. She's awake. She's knocked out. It's very uneven. This was a lot more smoother, and the cinematography was really good. There's this one shot of Crazy Ralph biking along when Ginny's car's coming along. It looks like something out of Peter Rabbit. It's beautiful. I will give this an 8. And I'm going to do a proper ranking one year, but at the moment I'm just sort of working this out and going on because why not? It's Friday the 13th. I need to do something for Friday the 13th. There's not much to talk about because the court case is going nowhere. Now part 3. Part 3 is fun. It is camp. It is cliched. It's got canned music, which the second you hear the same cue start every time, you know what's going to happen. But it was quite successful in the cinema. It was done for more a general audience. It was still R-rated, but seems a bit lighter. And part of that is just because they literally needed to light the scenes with a lot of light for the 3D to work. It doesn't really work in shadows. So it's a much different feel and look to all the other Friday the 13th. And I've always found it in some ways the most enjoyable. You spend a bit more time with the characters. There's not as much gore and dark stuff. So, because when I'm reviewing them, I find I tend to watch the scenes between the actors more than the kills and that, because if you watch them too much, they do lose all their power. So I try to save them for just individual viewings, like not marathon viewing. So I tend to not even watch the kill scenes half the time. So I find it more rewatchable. So I'm going to give it a 7. So there's like little mini reviews. Now the fourth film is my favourite. For a long time it was the second film, but as I got a little bit more mature, and also learned more about the production, I found the battle between Jason and oh my god, what's Corey Haim's character's name? Jarvis. What was it? Tommy Jarvis. God, I can't forgot his name. And his sister to be really terrifying, consistently terrifying. Every time I watch the final scenes of that film, I get the goosebumps, and it just terrifies me. And it's partly because the performance is just that great, in part because the guy playing Jason was a stuntman. He just said, look, just go at me. Just go at me and I will show you how just defenseless you are as a character against this character, and use that. And Kimberly Beck was the actress, and the scene where Jason's holding her down and she's just attacking and panicking and attacking him at the same time is terrifying, because it is absolutely real. It's just absolutely real. And like, I had an older sister that sort of the same sort of age gap, and I was living separately with my mum, separated from my dad, and I kind of relate a bit to that family dynamic as well. I don't know if my sister would fight to the death to defend me and try and save my life, but I'd like to think she would. And it's believable that these characters are believable, whereas a lot of the other films, they're not quite so believable. But this two siblings trying to survive a situation just is really powerful. And the film is very dark. I think in sort of reaction to the third film, which was kind of light and camp, this film is very dark. I think it's the darkest out of all the films. Not just literally with the cinematography, but in general. They really wanted to do a really good horror film and have good characters, and that's why it is the best one, in my opinion. Now we get to the fifth film. Now I have watched the fifth film a million times. I do enjoy it. It's well made, but there are elements that don't work, like not having Jason technically in the film and having another killer being a copycat. But we do have Jason in the film. His ghost is there. He does haunt Tommy, so he's really there. We do have real shots of the real Jason. But because at this point, the franchise hadn't gone to him being the living dead, a zombie, something paranormal. At this point, he really was just a person who died, and it was just Tommy imagining him. But now we know better when we look at the whole franchise. It actually was his ghost. So he is in the film. And those scenes, they do do justice to Tommy and his trauma, and the actor was very good. Now this actor did like that film and then retired to be like a Christian or something, and we never saw him again. But he did a really good job, and the other actress does a good job too. But when you learn a lot about the film's production, it undermines the performances sometimes. We know how much she hated the character and thought it was just the stereotypical, damsel in distress, and there are scenes where she's like, this is ridiculous, why am I doing this? So when you're watching the film, you're like, yeah, that was where she's like thinking, why am I doing this? Kind of undermines it, and she comes off a bit catty in some of the interviews, but in regards to the director and that. Because he did porn, and apparently he was a bit unconventional, but he gives good performances, and I wonder if he was gay or not, because when you look, there's so much coded stuff in that film. The little leather boys and the guy who acts as the son at the start. He some of his gear is like bondage slave stuff and that. And I'm like, I don't think that was incidental. I think there's a few shots that are oddly pornographic in their the way. I'm not going to go into all that. I'll do a proper review of it someday, like when I actually have the time to do it properly. The other thing, a lot of people criticize the like that would happen element of the film, and I'm like, well, you know what, like the killer, that someone else would do this. And I was thinking about it, and I'd never thought about it really until a couple of hours ago, but why did he do what he did? Why did he dress up like Jason to kill these people? And I'm like, well, of course he blamed the institution that he was at for his death, because they didn't take care of him. So he was killing these people, punishing these people, and he probably thought, how can I get away with this? I know, because Tommy Jarvis was there. He obviously was aware of who was at whether the whole town knew or whether he just knew because he'd gone there to pick up the body, that Tommy Jarvis was there, and he would have been familiar with the legend of Jason Voorhees because of his age. So he said, I'll use that to get away with killing these people and getting revenge on these people that killed my son, that I'm projecting my guilt for abandoning this kid and just watching him from a distance, probably making sure he was okay, but never actually stepping in and acknowledging his fatherhood. So he would have had all that internal guilt over that, and he projected it onto them and then found a way to get away with it, which is being a copycat, thinking that the legend of Jason would sort of help him get away with it, but then he doesn't succeed in the end. So I actually think it does actually work if you think about it. Okay, part 6. Part 6... Now, I said part 4 was the best. It is the best, but part 6 is my favourite. Part 6 is where it turns and Jason becomes a zombie. And it was one of the films I watched a million times. I was in hospital and I went to the video store and I got a few videos because I basically took the ward TV video and kept it in my room the whole time because I was a selfish teenager. And I watched part 6 and 5, but mostly part 6 a million times. And one of the first horror films I had my own video copy of as a kid that I got from the rental store. And I watched that a million times. And it's fun. It's a little bit camp. It's knowledgeable. It breaks the fourth wall. It knows what it is. But it does, within all that, once you gets you past all that baggage, it manages to deliver some really good scenes. Some really good horror scenes. And the first scene where we, wake Jason up all Frankenstein-like with the lightning, it's brilliant. It's classic. It's so classic that you just believe it, even though it's ridiculous. But, they managed to, I don't know how he pulled this off. I've seen Tom McLaughlin, the director, interviewed a bunch of times, and he really should have been able to do more. He should have taken over that franchise and just kept going, and he would have been great. But, and the characters are great. Jennifer Cook, what's the name of the actor who played Tommy? He was in Return of the Living Dead, both versions, and he was really hot, and he's really believable and likable, and it just works. Everything about the film works. They've got an actual camp running with kids in it. There's the legend, then there's the denial. It just works really well, and of course we have Jason at the bottom of the lake at the end of the film. It's just great. There's nothing, and the music, Alice Cooper did the music. There's just nothing bad about this film. There's nothing. Complete hitting it out of the park on every level. Love it. The seventh film was a great idea, and I didn't give it a number, did I? Part 5, I'm going to give part 5, I think it gets a 5. It's kind of like part 1, where it's good, but there are some elements that don't quite work, and it's rewatchable in some ways, but it didn't have as great an impact, and kind of like 3, blah, blah, blah. So now we get to 7. My God, I'm 6, sorry, 6. 6, I'm going to give 6. Do I give it a 10? I don't think I can give any film a 10, so I'm going to give it a 9. Now 7. 7 has a really good premise, Carrie versus Jason. That was the premise, but unfortunately they didn't give it the budget or the attention it should have gotten. Paramount was like, we want this cockroach of a film series to die. It makes us look bad because we think it's trash, but it makes a lot of money, so we have to keep pumping it out. So there really was some issues with the production of the films at that point, where the directors and the producers felt they weren't getting the full support of Paramount, and because all through the 80s they had these do-gooders had just absolutely attached all their issues with modern society and blaming horror for all the ills of modern society, and they just put it on Friday the 13th and Married with Children, but mostly Friday the 13th, and they just rallied against that film. Even just the film as a series, the film series, not the individual films sometimes, which didn't have some of the issues they were just going on about, but they were projecting all this stuff, and yeah, so that's why Paramount wanted the film series to go away, but they love money, so they kept making them. But the 7th film, it's got the weakest cinematography. It looks like it was done for TV. It's got some good scenes. I mean, the makeup, what saves it is the makeup, because they so didn't care. They just said, let's just let the makeup man, who's going to be there all the time fixing up the makeup anyway, let's just let him direct. And he doesn't understand how to make a good Friday the 13th scene. There's no tension in any of the scenes or any of the shots. It's really just, look at my effects. Let's just see Jason walking towards someone for a minute with no suspense, knowing he's going to put his hand, shove his hand through his chest and pull his heart out, and just focus on my beautiful makeup. That's his directing style. But it is amazing, and you can just look at it. But the film had no suspense, no impact the first time I saw it. It was just nothing. Up until the last battle. The last girl, they do put Jason through the absolute ringer, and there's the controversy of showing his face, and that the first real Jason actor, you cannot forget his name right now. Oh my God, I've forgotten the name of the actor. Oh my God, that's a sacrilege. Okay, I'll pretend I didn't do that and come back to him later. He put a lot of emotion and anger and rage into Jason. He did make him seem like a real entity, even though he was a zombie. And that really kept him in the role for as long as he did, and gets him seen as the Jason, not just because he did the most films, 7, 8, 9, 10, but unfortunately not Freddy versus Jason. But sometimes it doesn't work for me because it makes him too real, that he isn't just this shadowy thing just sort of coming for you like some machine you can't stop. He does seem like this angry monster. So there's some good and some bad to the performance. But it is how people see Jason now. So and I kind of found the Jason before him to be scarier, even though he's played by 4 different people. No one person played the character twice until he wanted to. So yeah, I do like the film. It's quite rewatchable because it doesn't diminish in any way over time, because it never had any impact. So far as some of the other films, they were really scary the first time you see them, then you watch them again, they're not as scary, but you still sort of watch them. So I'm going to give 7. I'm going to give 7 like a 6. I don't think any of them are going to get under 5 because I love them that much. Now, Part 8. I actually enjoy Part 8 more than I should. I really do. I think it's because they're stuck on the ship and they took a cruise. And I took a cruise when I was like in high school, and and it was a really tiny, crappy ship as well. And I don't know, the trapped on the ship works for me, and they could have just done the whole film like that. It's a pity they didn't, because originally it was just, that was the premise. And then they had, let's put him in New York. And then they said, well, let's do both. We'll put him on a boat to New York. And then they ran out of money to do the New York side of things, and then just became all on the boat. And I'm like, why didn't they just do Jason on a boat? Jason in a small, confined environment with people trapped is interesting, and that's what works for the film. And some of the supernatural stuff with the lead character, the final girl, kind of works as well. but it was a little choppy. The makeup, one thing that makes this film suffer is it has the worst makeup of all the films, and it followed the one with the best makeup of all the films. So it's really jarring when Jason goes from this dark, evil, rotting zombie to this wet, pasty, Phantom of the Opera face weird thing. It just doesn't work. But fortunately, the ending is so confusing. We've had confusing endings in the Jason films. The second film did it beautifully in a Hitchcockian way, mysterious, didn't know what happened, how it ended. It just ended because you knew no one thought the second film was going to be the final one at all. The third film, they try for the same, and it just becomes confusing with the mother coming out of the lake, who they haven't really established well. If you've only seen the third film, all you know is that the mother was killed. The first film, you don't really understand. It doesn't make that much sense to non-fans. So, but this ending, where he dissolves into a child, and you sort of think, are these people just delusional? Is this her imagination? Is she crazy? Is this her vision? Is it literally the fumes from the chemicals that have made them like hallucinate? Did he physically turn into a boy? Was there some sort of curse? Because we know Jason is a zombie. Was he brought back from the dead? It is established later in the films that he was brought back from the dead by the Book of the Dead, because they literally have the Book of the Dead from the Evil Dead films in Jason Goes to Hell, but some people don't consider Jason Goes to Hell a Friday film. Now I'm going to keep going, even though this is the last Friday the 13th film, and I'm going to give it a 6. I got to give it a... No... I only gave 2 and 8, so I can't give it a 7. So I'm going to go with 6. But the 9th Friday the 13th film, with Kane Hodder back again as Jason, thank God I remembered his name. I really loved it. It was the first Friday the 13th that I really saw that I hadn't seen or knew of. It was sort of new. And it definitely went a different way, which was interesting. It got my attention. It was interesting. They just made this supernatural thing where you cut Jason out of the film. He's at the start and the end, and you have someone else doing the killing, but it's him, but it's not. And they had a lot of likable performances, and it was the first sort of 90s one. So I do like it. I have a soft spot for it, but when I rewatch it, you can really tell the filmmakers were in their early 20s when they made the film, and they know really what they're doing. They just said, let's just give the kids some money and see what they make. And it was interesting. There's parts of it that I do love, particularly when we get Jason back, and the start is kind of good as well. But it's mostly body swapping, and you see Jason reflected in a mirror while someone else who Jason's spirit is in. And the idea that they did, because they established he was a zombie in the 6th film, but this time they kind of explained how. And then people say, well, why would Mrs. Voorhees be after the counselors in the first film if Jason is alive? And I'm like, well, for starters, if you've seen Pet Sematary, dead is better. That's why he probably came back a monster. She brought him back, he came back a monster, and then he continued to grow, and that's how he grew. Because people are like, how can he be an adult when he died as a child? Because he was brought back as a zombie, and they do kind of live, in a way. So, so I think the overall series does have a consistency if you really try hard to see it. Now, the 10th film, I'm going to give 9 a 7, because I kind of locked myself in with the other numbers. But the 10th film, I saw that in the cinema. It was the first Friday film I saw in the cinema, but it's not a Friday film, it's a Jason film. I loved it as a science fiction film and a horror film and a trapped in a ship kind of like Part 8 film. But it's hard. The rewatchable factor is harder because it is a cheap film. They did a really good job with the budget they had, and they really used the digital film and being able to manipulate the image later and make it look better than they really had the budget for. And I remember being really impressed by the scene when the ship crashes into the space station. But looking back at it all now, it's very digital and it looks cheaper now. And the jokes, they're still pretty funny, but it is really light and probably the lightest of all the films. Kane Hodder still does a great job. The idea that Jason is actually eliminated and that he's actually gone kind of upsets me. They should have left him a mystery in the lake instead of doing this. But and also because they sort of established a year, which implies that Jason is gone off the planet now and he's no longer a threat. I really don't like that. They should have put it so far in the future, like 100 years, not 5, 10, 20, that idea that now Jason is like frozen cryogenically now somewhere in some facility irks me. But it is what it is. Now, Jason versus Freddy. Now, I'm going to give I'm going to give it a 6. Now, Jason vs. Freddy. I love Jason vs. Freddy. I saw that in the cinema. Everyone I knew got excited for it. It had a proper marketing campaign, actual budget, good cinematography since like the fourth film. And it was a real crowd-pleasing event, summer film. Everyone went to see it. I saw it with friends, and walked out with a lot of the stuff after the premiere, which I shouldn't have done, which I still have some of the standees in that. Wasn't as moral a person back then. It's great. Some people argue that, one character got preference, and the fact that Kane Hodder isn't in this film, it's really just Freddy versus the stunt double. But the stuntman did actually play Jason in an earlier film, and he's a likeable guy, so we're kind of giving him a pass. But a lot of fan outrage over the fact that Jason wasn't really in the film. But seeing sort of stubby, angry Jason going after Freddy, it would have really seemed like, knowing it's both the real actors who both played the roles for years, it would work. But seeing that big lumbering Jason also works, so it's kind of hard. You understand the vision the director had that he wanted to go with, and he didn't appreciate the fans were really attached to the actor. I don't know. I do have issues with it sometimes, but then I get why it works in other ways. And it's nice to have, a lot of teens, a lot of the way they played Jason and Freddy together against each other, that they were actually, Freddy was using Jason and Jason gets to just run free. It is an enjoyable film, and it's really cinematic, and it does leave the end vague. No one really wins, so it works. And you could never win anyway, because if Jason kills Freddy, Freddy kills Jason, Jason's just going to come back from the dead. If someone pulls Freddy out of the fantasy world, the dream world, and Jason kills him, he just goes back to being Freddy in the dream world again. So there really was no way he could win. And that was, I guess, what they knew when they made the film, so they didn't have to worry. And now I'm going to give that an 8, on par with 2 and 4. They all are the best ones. Actually, no, I gave 6 and 9, so I'm going to give 8. Oh, no, I can't give it more than 4. It's very confusing. I'm trying to rank them, but I didn't think about this before I started. Because you have loyalty to one where it's like, well, this is better than this, but this is good in its own terms. So I'm not going to review the actual remake film as part of the series, because it's kind of separate, it's its own universe. But I did like it. Jason was a bit more like Leatherface, the way he moved. It was scary in the cinema, but it didn't really, I don't find it as watchable to rewatch. So, because once that tension and fear is gone, there isn't a lot left, which is what I find is a bit of a problem with modern horror, where they just go for the gore and the terror. It sort of works the first time, but once you know what's going to happen, it just sort of falls flat. So it's okay. I do enjoy parts of it, but so I'm not giving that a number. So basically 4 and 6 tied on 9. I think 4 is the best, but 6 is my favourite. And 2 and 11 sort of came up tying for like the second place, because I did think part 2 was the best for a while. And 11, I really enjoy also the group sort of horror of this whole group of people taking on Freddy and Jason, rather than just the final girl sort of scenario, or the final girl and her guy, which is sort of how all the other films went. But so that's my ranking of the films and my overall review for the whole series. I love Friday the 13th. I'm going to be watching it every Friday the 13th for the rest of my life, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I plan. And feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think of the films. I'll have to do a proper review of each one, partly because I have a lot of knowledge of these films over the years and all the stuff I've read and looked at. And I'd like to sort of talk about each one properly. I think each Friday the 13th from now on, I'll do a review of at least one of the films, because I need to do something each time. But I'm going to go back to watching Friday the 13th. I'm up to 6, although I watched some of it last night and fell asleep to it because I was up late enough I got through 5. But I'm going to start from 6 again, which is always the real Friday the 13th marathon on Friday the 13th evening, which I normally start around 7 or 8. It's always the best because it always starts with part 6, which is my favourite. So I'm going to go enjoy Friday the 13th. Happy Friday the 13th. Bye.